All right, let's get across all of those headlines now. I'm joined by Sky News host, National Affairs Editor at the Daily Telegraph, James Morrow. One Nation Chief of Staff James Ashby. Gents, welcome. I guess we shouldn't be surprised here, James Morrow. He couldn't carve out some sort of exemption here for Australia because the PM talked tough, but forced to admit today he couldn't get a call returned from the White House. I made the point, I know exactly how you book those calls, and not to get one returned, things are pretty crook. He was elected in November, Donald Trump. The PM could have seen him at any opportunity, but he hasn't. He's also left in place an ambassador that's repeatedly sneered at the president. And I know from insiders in the White House, there's no love lost with Kevin Rudd. The foreign minister, well, she can woo all the Palestinians at the UN. She has virtually no entree herself with the administration. So are you surprised that Australia's lost out here?
Well, no, Peter, I'm really not. And I'm glad that you played that clip of the Prime Minister back before when he was criticizing Scott Morrison because, hey, you know, it looks like Anthony Albanese has finally discovered that Prime Ministering, it's hard. It's a hard thing to do, and it's not as easy as just going out and making glib statements like that. As you say, we've had since November to start working on this relationship. The Kevin Rudd issue has been a live one since well before Donald Trump's election. I remember speaking with you about whether or not he would be tenable as a choice to continue in that role as ambassador. And I think we spoke about how that wouldn't work. It would be a nonsensical idea to keep him in that role. Here we are. So, you know, there's been nothing given to Donald Trump, a very transactional guy on that. But it's also important to understand, Peter, how the Americans look at Australia and how the Trump administration looks at Australia. And, you know, for Trump, Australia is a cautionary tale when it comes to free trade and energy policies. They see us as a country that has used free trade to lower consumer prices, but lose all of our manufacturing, and at the same time have world-high energy prices, meaning we can't get it back. And they see Australia as a cautionary tale. So you have to understand the way Trump thinks about the world when you understand why he's acting like that. And, you know, our own policies and our own behavior, I think he looks at it and says, why would you have done this with your country, you know, when you had all of this good stuff going for you?
And this is where I've got sympathy for what he's doing in relation to China, less so obviously Australia, James. But when we were there in the pandemic, we only had one factory in country Victoria that made masks. So much of our products we were sourcing from offshore. Those supply chains were stopped. It was only about a year ago we had issues with saline for hospitals. We had one manufacturer only here. We had to import all this saline, which is just salty water, for God's sake. But he is trying to avoid where we were in the pandemic and still are if something was to happen, where we are completely dependent on China. He doesn't want that to happen to the US, and he wants jobs and vibrant communities in that Rust Belt.
Well, Australia has been on economic suicide watch for at least the last 10 years. That's why there's been such high immigration, because it's propped up GDP. Where we've lost the manufacturing to other countries, we've had to make up that cash somewhere. And immigration on both watches. The Coalition brought in over 3.2 million in the 9 years they were in government, and now Labor have put that on steroids again. We've signed ridiculous agreements. We've seen the Coalition. I remember David Littleproud saying the Nationals signed on to net zero because otherwise we would have faced tariffs from EU neighbouring countries or those that we do trade with. We know that tariffs can be implemented by any country, and yet we've got weak-livered government officials here that have destroyed the windscreen industry here in Australia. You can buy windscreens delivered to an automobile shop for $30 in this country, yet we can't produce them for any less than 130. Why didn't we stop that? Why are we allowing now salmon, fresh salmon fillets, to be brought into Australia, sold at the Sydney fish market, when we've got a perfectly good industry that's operational in Tasmania? Now, Labor say they support that. The Greens don't. But it seems to me these governments have been hell-bent on destroying our manufacturing and our capabilities to be self-reliant as a country. And where are we now? We're staring down the barrel of economic obliteration, not just in aluminium and steel, but so many other industries. Shame on them both.